Shimano, welcome back to Breakfast. It is 7:45. There are fears recent political chaos in France could have severe impacts on New Caledonia. Deadly riots erupted in the territory in May amid the ongoing independence struggle, leaving the economy in tatters. Broadcaster Sarah Bradley has recently completed her PhD on this issue and joins us now. Sarah, it is so good to see you, and many of our viewers will recognise you as well.
That's right. It's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's lovely. Anyway, and we're talking about such a completely different topic. But
right.
Tell me about what brought you to study New Caledonia in the first place.
Well, I'm a complete Francophile. I love everything French. I love French food. I love the French language. But ironically, my speaking French, is terrible, in spite of spending decades at university and at school learning it. So when I was doing my PhD in New Caledonia and I had to do a lot of research, I had to work really closely with my tutor to prepare all the questions. Yeah. And then I had to pretend I knew what they were saying until I went back and had it properly transcribed and translated. But also, the other reason I chose New Caledonia as my topic and the independence process is I did my Masters in International Relations on the New Zealand-French relationship in the South Pacific, and then I also worked at the UN, or the New Zealand mission to the UN, in 2015 and 2016, and I did a little bit of negotiation in one of the committees on the UN General Assembly. And so my thesis is on the independence struggle, which has gone on for 40 years, using negotiation phases to explain how the process has gone. Okay,
so that's 40 years. We won't go over all of that, but there were riots back in May in New Caledonia. Right. So can we start there? What happened?
So the reason they rioted in May in New Caledonia is because France unfortunately undermined the terms of the Noumea Accord, and the Noumea Accord is the most recent political agreement. It was signed in 1998. President Emmanuel Macron unilaterally decided to change the provincial electoral roll in New Caledonia, and that's the role that decides who's in local government, in favour of the French loyalists. Right. This, of course, infuriated the independentists, who are primarily indigenous Melanesian Canucks. They revolted really strongly, looting, rioting, setting up roadblocks, burning cars, destroying the economy. France, in turn, responded swiftly and harshly, sent thousands of military troops and police, and 13 people died, including 11 Canucks and 2 French gendarmes. Now, the problem is that the economy has been left in complete and utter ruin. They are on the brink. It's estimated about 2.2 billion euros of damage. Wow. But of course, this unrest has been brewing for decades, in particular since the 2021 referendum, the last referendum.
So you mentioned, New Zealand and the Pacific earlier. So this instability in New Caledonia, how does that impact us here in New Zealand and the Pacific?
Well, let me just talk. Can I just talk a bit about why the unrest has been brewing, because that will help explain how New Zealand is interested. So I mentioned the Noumea Accord, which was signed in 1998. It's the last political agreement, and it had 3 main pillars. The first pillar was this provincial electoral roll, which provided parity between the loyalists who want to stay with France, mainly French migrants, and the independentists, mainly Canucks, who want to be independent. It provided parity, otherwise the Canucks are minority and they could never win a referendum. The second thing it did was it gave certain administrative powers to New Caledonia. Not the big ones, not finance, not law and order, and not foreign affairs, but certain powers so they could run the local economy. And thirdly, it provided for 3 independence referendums. The first 2 in 2018 and 2020 ran smoothly, and the Loyalists won by a very narrow margin. And in fact, the referendum in 2020, 52% voted to stay with France and 48% to become independent. That's how close. Yeah. The problem was that in 2021, what happened, the final referendum was in the midst of COVID, and the Canucks were disproportionately affected by COVID. Many more Canucks died than non-Canucks, and in their culture, they have to mourn for a certain period their dead. They were not able to campaign in the referendum. They said, we please France, can you delay the referendum? France refused, the Kanaks boycotted it, and France, the pro-France faction, won by a landslide. And the Kanaks do not recognise that the result of that referendum. And so that, I think, leads into your question about where New Zealand stands. So it's a bit of a conundrum for New Zealand, because on the one hand, Winston Peters wants a fair independence process, and Winston Peters said about that 2021 referendum, he said, while the referendum was to the letter of the law, it wasn't in the spirit of the process. So on the one hand, New Zealand wants a fair independence process and an independent New Caledonia of some sort. On the other hand, China would love to see an independent New Caledonia. And China's already been making inroads. It's now the second biggest importer of New Caledonia's nickel, which makes car batteries. So the issue here is New Zealand and other Western powers would be concerned that China would get even a greater foothold in New Caledonia if and the rest of the Pacific if they become independent. So you can see the conundrum there.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, we've run out of time.
No.
We have.
We haven't even...
So quickly, I know, we have so much more to cover, but it is so lovely to have you join us here on the Breakfast Couch. And obviously this is simmering away, so,
yes.
We'd love to have you back on the program.
I'd be very happy to be here.
Yeah, beautiful to see you. Sarah Bradley joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Bradley and I worked in the Wellington newsroom many moons ago.
Sure, she'll have some stories to tell us in that case.
When I got into trouble, she was right beside me. We were both trouble.
Oh.
Nice to see you, Sarah Bradley. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
It's been quite the